I have no more, but I believe I'm in charge of introducing our next speaker, which is Chuck Wilson. Chuck is the Chief Science Officer for the GoMRI program, and he also serves as that for GOMA. So I'll turn it over to you, Chuck.
Thank you very much, Laura, and enjoyed your talk again. Thank you. I'm certainly delighted to be here and thank the Louisiana Sea Grant team for organizing this event and all the Sea Grant teams for all the events they organize. I'm sorry I can't smile at you, but we're in the area where Sally made landfall, and we've been out without internet now for almost 8 weeks. This is particularly meaningful and nostalgic, as Rita and Robert alluded, because I had the pleasure of working with the wonderful Louisiana Sea Grant team for many years. We went through Katrina together, a number of other hurricanes, all the way into Deepwater Horizon, and I've been very lucky to continue that relationship. I also want to thank our excellent panelists. Jen, you want to pop the slides up there? I want to thank our excellent panelists, as we have asked a great deal of our research community and the research leaders, and they've been critical to delivering GoMRI science messages to the community like you. So it's really been great. There we go. Next slide, Jim. Thank you. I want to give a brief perspective and background to the nature of federal investment of funding in the Gulf region compared to other large bodies of water. I think those of us in the research world have been well aware, and this is an older table that was produced by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. On the left axis here is millions of dollars, that the Gulf of Mexico has lagged woefully behind the Great Lakes regions and the Chesapeake Bay. The arrow indicates the annual GoMRI investment from 2011 to about 2019. So we had 8 years of investment of, as Rita said, of $40 to $50 million that actually brought the Gulf region on par with the Great Lakes and the Chesapeake Bay region. But our job's not over. It's really important that we as a community work with the federal representatives to get appropriate federal funding for an extremely important area, as the Admiral mentioned. We have a lot of different types of commerce through shipping, tourism, recreational, and commercial fishing. And so it's very important that we fight to continue to get funding for the Gulf region, as GoMRI has supported for the past 9 years. Next slide, Jen. As Rita reported, over the past 10 years, the GoMRI Research Board has awarded over $400 million, and we've funded research consortia and small teams that are distributed throughout the United States and world. And this is a footprint of GoMRI investments. And as you can see, we are in almost all states. We have invested resources in almost all states and even 17 different countries, including Hawaii and Alaska. We knew this funding would attract a large number of people from a large geographic area, but it clearly demonstrates there were talents all over the country and world necessary to undertake the diverse variety of research funded by GoMRI. BP's directive to GoMRI was to build capacity in the region. We were successful in supporting and making possible great consortia teams and individual researchers located in the Gulf states, but that success was in part built on the expertise of people from around the world, and certainly Louisiana is no exception. You will hear from 4 of our great consortia later today who have just done an incredible job. Next slide, please, Jen. Now I'm going to quickly walk you through some of the science that's emerged, trying to avoid what you're going to hear about in a little while. You can find all this information on our website. I encourage you to go there. We have articles that are written, and we have access to a very large, rich research database and publication database, and you'll hear some more in a few minutes. But regarding that top left slide, GoMRI made a huge investment in oil transport and modeling, which required that we learn more about surface and subsurface currents. Those studies brought to light improved understanding of large scale, medium scale, and fine scale currents that affect particle movement both at the surface and subsurface. These studies that were done will lead to model improvements of tracking future oil spills. They've already been incorporated, Coast Guard vessel and personnel recovery, and even hurricane forecasting, because one of our research projects occurred, they were collecting drifter data, and a hurricane went directly through the middle of those data. Remarkable data set. The second image talks about another really important area for GoMRI, and regarding the fate of oil, that microbes and plankton had distinct interactions with oil. Subsequently, we documented the formation of a newly described form of marine snow called marine oil snow. And the presence of Corexit likely inhibited the formation of this really important microbial generated marine snow that mixes with oil to sink to the bottom. Estimates are up to 10 or 15% or even more of the oil was bound up into this matrix, transported to the bottom around the Deepwater Horizon site and in the field of the plume. This transport process has actually been proposed as a mechanism that should be documented in the mass oil spill balance. So we have learned, and I'll talk about this in a minute, bacteria play a major role in the fate of oil. The bottom slide, this is back in a laboratory at Johns Hopkins University. Researchers use high-speed digital holography imaging in laboratory experiments to document the increase of surface-objected droplets due to wave action and rainfall. A number of these aerosolized oil droplets increased in oil slicks treated with dispersant. These particles were actually down to micron and submicron in size and could escape hazmat air filtration gear used by response workers. So this area is a new area of research that the hazmat community, the response community, is focusing on, because we certainly want them to be safe when they're out there fighting an oil spill. Next slide, Jim. As I mentioned, we've had a large number of microbial ecology studies within the GoMRI community, and it really wasn't surprising at all for some of our research to find that there was a resident, prepared, if you will, microbial community which quickly responded to and began to degrade the oil, and it was almost immediate. This is a unique aspect to the Gulf of Mexico and other tropical regions of the world where they have natural seeps like we do in the Gulf, and it really helped to mitigate the spill's impact. It's not as prevalent in many parts of the world, such as off of Canada and the North Sea, but we were very lucky in the Gulf to have a ready population of microbes. Regarding that first slide to the right, scientists found an increase in specific oil-degrading bacteria, followed by a return to a diverse non-oil-degrading bacteria about a year later. So the community responds, digests the oil, and then it goes back to what it was before, more or less. This was in the beaches, in the open ocean, and in the marshes. We found all the same general patterns. Overall, there was an initial increase in bacteria for about 3 months that degraded saturated hydrocarbons. They were followed by a more specialized group of bacteria that consume other aromatic hydrocarbons. And our chemists are learning how to follow the fate of these different chemicals using new novel techniques. Not surprisingly, we had a group of scientists study microbial response if nitrogen was added to the water. You can imagine, much like your garden, if you put nitrogen out there, you will increase plant growth. Well, the same is true for bacteria. That nitrogen serves as an important nutrient, and it actually enhances microbial degradation. And this has been proposed in the past as a way to responding to an oil spill, is just to help the bacteria grow. So a lot more work to be done there. Of interest, and you may know this, that in the deeper parts of the ocean where nutrients are limiting and it's much colder, that degradation process is much slower. Similarly, as I mentioned just now, that the high pressure of the deep ocean also impacted bacterial growth and oil degradation down in the deep ocean. So naturally, it occurs more slowly there than it does up at the surface where it's warm and nutrient rich. Next slide. You'll hear more about this in a minute, but we had an army of researchers working in Louisiana and Alabama in the wetlands. And no doubt you saw some of the disheartening images of oil as it rolled up into the Louisiana marshes and onto many of our charismatic wetland organisms. Turns out there's some good news and some bad news. Rick will speak to this, as will Dr. Rabelais. Dr. Shaw and Dr. Rabelais will speak to this in a few minutes. But overall, good news and bad news was where the oil hit the wetlands, we had some mortality and some loss of marsh. In other areas, it's recovered very well. So stay tuned for that story. The second slide is a little bit more disturbing story to me personally, and I'm sure to many of you. A common coastal inhabitant, the coastal dolphins, were shown to have been seriously impacted by the oil spill, and those impacts continue today. Researchers documented high pregnancy failures, lung damage, not unlike COPD and emphysema, which we are still tracking. it will likely be a generation before those harmful components of the oil spill on these dolphin populations actually works through the system, because these animals are affected for life. There's a lot more detail on that if you're interested. I'll skip over that. That last one goes back to the marsh story you'll hear about, and one of the concerns is that it may be years, if not decades, for some of the hydrocarbons that are buried in the marsh to recover. Next slide. Jen, thank you. Now let's go out to deep water. Scientific investigations, and you'll hear more about this later, I'm sure, clearly illustrate the lack of baseline data, because in the Gulf it is scant to almost non-existent in some of these habitats. That relates back to the lack of federal funding to this and the lack of research interest in that area. This was particularly true in our deep water community. Regarding that first slide, that's the anglerfish. You may have seen pictures like that in some of the magazines and in National Geographic. It's a fascinating yet poorly understood community in the deeper waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It ranges from 1,000 to 3,000 feet, made up of crustaceans, large plankton, young fish, and some adult fish that don't get much bigger than your thumb, and they're adapted to living in the deeper parts of all oceans. Around the oil spill site, the number of these organisms declined and has yet to recover. As you will hear, these organisms are an important prey for whales and other large pelagic organisms, but it's very concerning, and the group studying this has been funded to continue that work, because it was documented during the natural resource damage assessment process, and we continued to study it for the last 9 years, and it hasn't changed. Scientists also, this is the second slide, scientists also documented damage to some of the very delicate deep water coral communities. These soft corals live at the bottom of the ocean around the Deepwater Horizon site. They're in 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 feet of water, and they can live up to 800 years. So they're slow growing, very delicate, and very old. We found a large portion of this population was impacted by the spill under the Deepwater Horizon site and within the plume, and recovery will take a very long time. They're projecting 80 or 90 years before we really see any serious recovery. So it's one of the unfortunate sides of the story. We also found in the deep ocean there was a positive response by the microbial deep water community, because there was a lot of methane gas that was released with the oil spill. Typically that methane dissolves very quickly in the water as it rises to the surface, and there was a marine bacteria population in that deep water that metabolized, or ate, if you will, the methane as it was coming to the surface. So that's really important in the fate of hydrocarbons, as I mentioned. So, next slide, Jim. Rita mentioned some of our wonderful legacies. I think it's really important to use this as a take-home message, because there's more to come from this story that you'll have access to through Sea Grant. There was an impressive amount of funding for research. The construct of GoMRI bridged the research gap between a disaster and the establishment of a long-term Gulf research and restoration program. So that's a huge part of our legacy, and it allowed for critical data collection and scientific discovery. Through the consortia framework, there is an amazing network of scientists that's been created. Examples of this network are in the room in the virtual meeting today, and they'll talk about it. But they include the scientific researchers that study events such as the Hercules gas blowout, later the Santa Barbara oil spill, or the Bonnie Curry spillway release associated with Deepwater Horizon. And they have all worked together as a result of GoMRI's investment in all of them together. In addition, there's a nursery collection of research established scientists. GoMRI has provided opportunities, as Rita mentioned, for over 1,200 master's and PhD students. This is our next generation of researchers to help with the Gulf of Mexico. As Laura mentioned, and Rita, we had the wonderful Go Moses conference, brought us all together, and will continue to. As Rita mentioned, the GridC database, it's available for anybody to go in and extract data to learn what we have learned. It's a wonderful system, and we will preserve it for at least the next decade, if not longer. And then finally, there is this huge contribution to the scientific body of knowledge that GoMRI has provided for all the publications, all the outreach documents. I mean, it's just a wonderful legacy. Challenge is we have raised as many questions as we have solved, and those questions will move us into the future.